So I came across this tweet and I thought it was interesting. Basically, it's coming from Rasputin, who is another YouTuber, makes great videos. You should check him out, follow him if you don't already. Very talented creator. But he said, anyone have any examples of games that were made considerably worse by including microtransactions? And to be clear, I don't mean made worse in that it's cringe that you have to look at them. I mean that the model of how they're included significantly lowers the quality of the game. And some people like started lighting him up being like, oh, you're justifying microtransactions. No, it's just an honest question. It's like a thought exercise. Do microtransactions by definition make a game worse? Inherently, just by their presence, do they make games worse? I want to come out right at the outset and say, no, microtransactions do not inherently make a game worse. You can have an amazing game and then have like secondary skins that you can buy for $5 on the side that nobody really needs, and it doesn't really affect anything, and the game can still be amazing, right? I don't really have a problem with microtransactions inherently. The problem is those types of microtransactions don't really make games or make money. Like those types of microtransactions don't really drive much by way of sales. So what developers do and what publishers force developers to do is find other ways to rework it and find other ways to compel you to engage with their microtransactions. So this could be something as aggressive as a video game has microtransactions where you can buy like loot or better weapons and guns that give you improved performance in the game immediately. The example I always go to would be something like, let's say, Call of Duty. If you guys remember Call of Duty Warzone, maybe like 2-3 years ago, it was during the pandemic, but they had that period where the gallantry was stupid broken. Like it was not even close. But you see him like using this gun that is just stupid powerful, okay? And it has like zero recoil. It's fantastic. And what would happen all the time within Warzone is that this Bren would just be totally broken. Recoil is non-existent, damage is super high. Maybe it even has like a slightly bugged headshot multiplier, so it does increased headshot damage. And it's just like, it's totally broken, needs to be patched. But ironically enough, they would just so happen to have that gun available in the store. And the blueprint was available, so you could just get the gun if you bought the microtransaction and use it immediately. Isn't that crazy? How funny is that? That's so crazy, because the only other way you can unlock it is by doing tons of challenges in the secondary, like multiplayer stuff, or by playing hundreds of hours and grinding your way to it. But most people would be like, hey, this is only going to be meta for like maybe a couple of like weeks, maybe even just a single week before they update it. So if I want to be competitive right now, I need to pay for that extra pack to get the blueprint with this gun, and then I can be competitive. And once they nerf it, that'll suck, but I'll just figure out what the next meta is. And so they break the game and then sell you the solution to it. I know it's kind of a conspiracy theory. A lot of people are like, no, I think it's just an honest mistake. No, it happens so often. It happened with the Bren, it happened with the Gallantry, it happened with the DMR, it happened with all these different guns that just totally broke the game. And they just so happened to be selling that gun that broke the game in the shop. So if you didn't want to grind for it or for the specific attachments, you could just go buy it, which was super, super toxic. Super toxic. Another more passive aggressive way of doing this would be with like Assassin's Creed Odyssey. One thing, like I will defend AC Odyssey because I think the game is really good, and I do think it gets more crap than it deserves. That being said, there are some problems, and it is far from a perfect game. One of the biggest problems with it is that it has a real aggressive grind towards the end. So like in your standard game, you might expect like progress to be very linear, so it's just straight as you go up. You complete missions. Maybe this is just time. I'm trying to get better at using this thing. So like we have time on this axis, and then this one would be like maybe just, but like, you know, power is the up down. Oh my God, I keep accidentally hitting the undo button. I'm a professional. And time is left, right. Okay. Boop, boop, boop. I'm a professional. What AC Odyssey did was that it was kind of like this. It kind of like excelled quickly and then plateaued kind of looked like a sine curve. So like it would just slowly grind out about 2/3 of the way through. And the last push to the end of the game was a real trudge. Okay. The problem with that is that it got really, really boring for a lot of people. But what they happened to do is they also sold for $5 an XP booster. And the funny thing was that the XP booster really came in clutch in this latter portion. So if you bought the XP booster, your time with the game would basically look like this. So you didn't have to grind out to be powerful enough for the end encounters. All of a sudden, that grind was just wiped out. Because what they did is that they balanced the game around you having that XP booster. And then when they took away the XP booster, they put enough side content in to make up for it. So like if you imagine that the main quest offers like, I don't know, this much XP, okay? But if you have the XP booster, it's actually like this much XP to get to the full max level by the time you take on the final boss and everything. So this is the total XP for completing the main story quest. And that's balanced around you having the $5 XP boost. Then what they do is they take away the $5 XP boost and they see that, okay, well now without the XP boost multiplayer, players are only getting to here by that point in the game with their XP because it's not multiplying their XP enough, so they don't get to that max level. So what they do is they then say, okay, well, we're going to put in all of this side content that you can grind out to make up the difference and get to that same level. And so effectively what happens is that players who bought the XP boost don't have to grind at all. They can just go straight to the end of the game and have a great time. And if they want to do the side content after the main story, they can do that. Who cares? But they don't have to grind. So they're basically selling you, again, the solution to a problem that they created. And that's what's really, really frustrating for a lot of players. It's like, you guys created the problem and now you're selling me the solution to it. But perhaps the most, well, so let me just say, like, that is an example of, once again, they look at the microtransactions and they're like, okay, we want to compel people to use this. So let's create a problem and sell them the solution. And in this case, the problem will be the grind. Another instance famously that is one of the worst examples, and by that I mean best examples of this particular thing, is of course Shadow of War. Shadow of War, another game from Warner Brothers, and in this case Monolith, who also did Shadow of Mordor, and they're working on a Wonder Woman game right now with a Nemesis system in it as well. They did a thing when this game came out in 2017 where they sold loot boxes. And they called them loot chests, and there were different tiers of them. Okay, so there were loot chests, there were war chests, and then there were XP boosts that they also sold you. And one of the things that this game was built around was having about a 25, if I remember correctly, like 25-ish hour campaign. You get through that, and then it would say, okay, now you have to defend your fortresses against the waves of Sauron and whatever. And you had to go through a pretty intense grind. And that grind involved getting a bunch of legendary tier orcs in positions of power within your fortresses to defend against the oncoming onslaught of all of these different attackers. Interesting idea, interesting dynamic for an end game, kind of cool. Problem was, they once again created a problem and then offered to sell you the solution. People did math back when this game came out, calculating how much money it would take to properly level to get to the end credits. And it was something outrageous. I mean, we're talking tens of thousands of dollars, tens upon tens of thousands of dollars to properly level using the loot crates and loot chests to get there. If you didn't want to do that, you could grind for 80 to 100 hours and hopefully get lucky enough that your orcs level up and are able to work their way up. Because the way the game works is that you can't have orcs higher level than you working for you. So if you like overcome a really difficult combat challenge and you're level 30, but then there's a level 40 orc you just took down, you can shame them to bring them down to your level. And then as you level back up higher and higher, they have to level up with you. You can't recruit a higher level orc than what you are. So it just is built around this idea of grind. One thing that they did though is it got so much backlash at the time because they basically were creating this problem and then they were selling you chests that would sell you orcs. Like you would open the loot box and it would have an orc, a legendary orc in it, if you happen to buy this loot chest or loot crate. And so people got so upset about it the game got a ton of negative press. Time went by. After player numbers started to really drop and people kind of were moving on from it, they then went in, patched, and removed that stuff from the game. So now if you play Shadow of War, it's this weird hollow thing where you can tell in the end game there's something missing because the grind isn't, like, it doesn't really work the same way it was designed. They shortened the grind, they made it easier to get through to see the final credits of the game and actually finish it, but they did that at the cost of cutting out all of this other stuff. So the game, the end game of this of Shadow of War feels really odd now. It's very, very strange. It's very strange. This game is a great example of how toxic these microtransactions could be. And then after, you know, they had served their purpose, they patched them out. And so now people go back and they play it. And like I did a video where I did like, and I tried this game again after however many years we did that video. And people were in the comments, even after I explained all of this in the video, and they're like, well, I just played it like a few weeks ago and it doesn't have any loot boxes. So I think you're just making stuff up. Like, I understand you're 12 years old and you weren't playing games like this when they came out, but this was a real problem that happened at the time. And it was only after not just getting a ton of flack for it, but also after people called them out for it and then stopped playing the game that they then fixed it, went in. And it's a real shame because the rest of the game is so impressive. There's so many cool things in Shadow of War, but it's just such a shame that it was handled so toxically. And whether that was Monolith's doing or if that was Warner Brothers forcing them to, I don't know. But real shame, because the game was great. But that's a great example of another one that had a ton of issues. As you could see, you could open up these war chests and like it was tied around the progression system. Like you would open it up and get legendary orcs as part of these crates that you would open up. It was ridiculous. It was crazy. It was crazy. So that's another good example. Another one, of course, is Battlefront 2. Battlefront 2, if you guys have not played that recently. Star cards, ooh baby. So one of the things around Battlefront 2 when it launched was, of course, that the game was extremely heavily monetized, again with loot boxes and loot crates. And this is one thing that's kind of died out in the years since. It's not considered like super viable anymore for these games to just go full frontal with loot crates and loot boxes. And I think it's because it's really hard to argue that these aren't a type of gambling, because it is. Like, it's just delusional to pretend like they're not. And they prey on a particularly vulnerable group of people, and especially targeting these types of mechanics to children leaves a really bad taste in everybody's mouth. Like it's a really bad look. So yeah, unless you're FIFA, and then nobody cares because it's like, yeah, FIFA sucks. Everybody agrees. Everyone's like, yeah, whatever. But it seems like nowadays the more acceptable thing, if you announce that your game has a battle pass, people are like, okay, whatever. But they don't immediately get upset. If you announce a new IP or a new like looter shooter or online live service game, and you say, yeah, and it's all based around loot boxes, people are probably going to get much more upset. Yeah, it's specifically targeting DSP basically. But like this, let me just describe this. I'll read this off. This is from their official Battlefront 2 page, okay? This is how they describe this star card system, okay? And I want you to listen to this in case you're not familiar with how Battlefront 2's progression and character system and upgrades work, because it's about to break your brain how anybody thought that this was not just pay to win. In Star Wars Battlefront 2, your hero's journey will be a more personalized experience that allows you to build careers for different trooper classes, heroes, and more. There's plenty of depth to join the breadth of new content, especially when it comes to customization with star cards, earned via unlockable crates. Now, to be clear, this is a post they put out before the game came out. So they were trying to describe, this is how it works in the game. This is what you should be excited for. So there is customization with star cards that you get through unlockable crates. You can also buy the crates. Resuming, keep that in mind. A version of this is now live in the closed alpha, blah, blah, blah. Using star cards, you'll be able to modify your favorite heroes and troopers to your specifications, creating ever more powerful and flexible combinations. Hero and trooper specific star cards can be applied across a player's ability slots in a dizzying array of possible configurations. Take Darth Maul's spin attack, for example. This powerful maneuver might be modified by specific star cards to travel further or move faster. Boba Fett players might employ a star card that extends his For the Hunt ability to reveal enemies not just in his own scanner, but to nearby allies as well. Classes can be outfitted with different star cards as well, and different combinations of star cards will reward players with vastly different experiences. One specialist might excel in trap laying, while another might concentrate on becoming the ultimate stealth sniper. Okay, interesting. They go on. You'll also have the freedom. You gotta love when they toss in freedom. This is about my liberty, I'll tell you what. The freedom to switch out cards on the fly, customizing your loadout during respawns to fit changing tactical conditions. And star cards don't stop with troopers and heroes. Heroes, ships, and starfighters will also have libraries of star cards available. You'll get star cards by completing in-game challenges and quests, as well through crates rewarded for gameplay progress in Star Wars Battlefront 2. You can also buy them. Cards come in a variety of rarities, with each tier reflecting a corresponding adjustment in power level. You'll earn new cards as you play, opening a new creative option for configuring your favorite classes and characters. It lands on November 17th, blah, blah, blah. I'm sure I don't need to tell you. It sounds like these star cards are pretty important, right? It sounds like this is pretty crucial. So what would happen is you would buy one of these loot crates, and then you would get these star cards of different rarities. Common star card. Oh, Bush Pilot. This is +1. Turn rate increase of 2.5%. So it's fair to say the more of these star cards you have, specifically the more high rate and high tier ones you have, the better your abilities will be. And it even applies to like the heroes and everything. So it's really crucial to have a lot of these star cards available to be able to use and implement. The problem, of course, being that a player with no star cards or only common star cards going up against another player in a competitive multiplayer game that has a lot of star cards because they bought a bunch of loot boxes is not even going to be close to competitive. It just won't be, because they have significant power improvements that come into it. It's not even close. And I ran into this just when I was playing the game like last year to go back and try it again. And the star cards make the game almost unplayable for a new player, because everybody who's still playing Battlefront 2 to this day has been playing it for a long time and already have all of these crazy star cards on all of their characters. And you can even see it when you die and like you see the character's profile, you can see what star cards they have equipped. And almost every player that I came across had all like purple and gold star cards because they had been playing this for so long. So it's straight up just pay to win. If you bought more of these and you got higher level star cards, you would do better than the players that didn't do that. And that's what pissed people off the most, is that it wasn't just a microtransaction put in the game to maybe make some extra cash. It was put in, and the game was designed around compelling you to purchase it. So the whole thing was just one big manipulation to get you to engage with it. Trooper crate, hero crate, starfighter crate. So all different crates that you can buy. Isn't that crazy? It's giving you the freedom, isn't it? It gives you the freedom to buy whatever star cards you want. So this is just another example of the problem of designing your game around the microtransactions as opposed to around compelling gameplay mechanics. It just breaks the game. It's a real tragedy at the end of the day, because you can take a game that's really good and it just collapses. Yeah, because it's designed to manipulate you at its core. And so to go all the way back to this original question posed by Rasputin, I think it's an interesting question to ask, which is why I wanted to talk about it, because I think it's an interesting thing to challenge your presuppositions and assumptions. And I think it's important you do that regularly. You know, we all assume microtransactions in games are bad. It's kind of like the starting point for a lot of these discussions. And sometimes it's good to reflect and be like, okay, is that necessarily the case? Is that actually true? Or do we have to be more specific? Is it true that microtransactions are bad? Not necessarily. Microtransactions are bad when the game's been designed around compelling you to use them. In this case, like Overwatch 2, I think is an example. If you're looking at just the cosmetics, sure, doesn't really matter. Buying skins for Moira, who cares? Like, if you have the fiery skin versus the starter skin, you're not going to play any better than me. Now, if you have an RGB gaming chair, then I'm screwed. But like with the skin, it doesn't really matter. Where you could maybe say it starts to get a little iffy is buying new heroes, because sometimes the heroes are broken. But at the same time, you can also say that that applies to everybody in the game equally. And there's only like one class per team, and they balance it pretty quickly. So, you know, I think they generally do a fairly good job as far as I can tell, as a casual normie gamer on the side of it. On the other hand, yeah, loots for loot. I think that that's an interesting point. On the other hand, you can argue it's cut content. But on the other hand, they would probably say they wouldn't have made that content if it wasn't going to be sold, because the only way that they could justify creating it is because they were going to sell it for $5 on the store, for $10 or $15 or whatever. Like, would all of these skins exist for foam stars if they didn't think they could get $45 for it? I mean, probably. These are skins that they developed specifically because they were going to try to charge for them. In some cases, I think it's definitely true, where it's like, you definitely design this and then cut it out of the game straight up. Like the mission in Hogwarts Legacy that is exclusive to PlayStation 5 gamers, that like kind of ticked me off, because it's just a really, in my opinion, it's probably the best side mission in the entire game, and it's just cut out for anybody that's not playing on PlayStation 5 because they paid them a fat stack. So that's frustrating. But yeah, microtransaction by itself not bad, but the greedy intent to design the game by transforming players into payers is truly disgusting. Yeah, and it is at its core, it's just manipulation of your customers, trying to get them to enjoy the gameplay loop and then manipulate them into paying more to have an advantage in the gameplay. And I just find that really toxic. And they can always say, well, you don't have to buy it. Nobody's forcing you to buy the skins and foam stars, or to go and buy the orcs. You know, if you just want to play the game, you can just play the game. It's like, yeah, but you designed it to be less fun for those that don't play. So if you have committed tens of hours of your life, 30, 40, 50 hours of your life to playing this game, and you just want to see it through, but then you realize you've got another 80 to play if you don't spend some money on microtransactions, like, you know what you're doing. They're not stupid. They know what they're doing. Brandon, plenty of academic research on loot boxes being associated with problem with gambling. Issue is worse among young people. I am a doctoral student writing a paper on this topic currently. That's crazy, Brandon. Yeah, and I believe it. It appeals to a difficult, or it appeals to a particularly vulnerable group of people who are susceptible to this type of thing. And especially, you know, with kids and people under 18, there's a huge problem. And that's why I think, was it China who recently passed like a regulation that their mobile games and console games, PC games, can't do a lot of this microtransaction heavy stuff with minors specifically. I think that type of thing is great. I think the US should probably pass laws saying that, like, yeah, you can't sell someone under 18 a bunch of loot boxes and gambling stuff, because they can't form the intent and consent to potentially waste their money. Like, they're kids, they don't really probably understand what they're getting themselves into, and you're just profiting off of that. And that's so immoral. It's crazy. Like, it's so toxic. It's crazy. I think really good games tend to make good money because they're just good games. Like, they earn the money because they're good games and people want to support them. But all of these groups try to take like the shortcuts.